When you mention parallel universes, the eyes sort of roll up and you giggle and you say to yourself, this is just silly, this is nuts. However, things have changed now. The paradigm has shifted. The multiverse idea, once thought to be so crazy it only belonged on evening night television, has now become the dominant theory in cosmology. It's unavoidable. You cannot avoid the theory of the multiverse.
Have you experienced DeJa Vu before? You know, the feeling that you have done or said something before? You shake your head, get your mind off it, and just go, hey, my mind has to be playing tricks on me. What if your mind weren't playing tricks on you? What if you had actually done those things, but not just in your universe, but another one? What if you have accidentally crossed from this universe to another one? What if you are like the man from Taured, the man that claimed he traveled from another universe into ours and sparked the greatest mystery that spanned across many years? How did he do it? How have you been doing it? Find out in this video.
And so the multiverse is not just some invention out of the ether. It flows out of an application of quantum mechanics to general relativity. We're not completely there yet with the full solution, but it's why the idea is taken seriously. It's not just an invention.
The man from Taured. If you were living in, let's say, in Texas, America, how would you feel if someone walked up to you and told you that you were no longer in Texas but in Saxt? You would think that person is cuckoo, right? Everything looks the same to you. Let's say you have your passport with you and you showed it to this person. This person sees it. They believe your passport is genuine, but they haven't heard the name of Texas before. Even your name looks weird to them. This was exactly what Berhodrik Janansfer did on a hot summer afternoon in July 1954 in Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan. Janansfer, neatly dressed, arrived at the airport like every other person. He had a Caucasian appearance and didn't look out of place except that he was different from the rest of the people he was in the queue with. However, that wasn't unusual. The Second World War had ended only 9 years prior, and with Japan's rising industrial growth after the war, Caucasian-looking visitors weren't strange, even if they spoke Japanese with a twinge of French accent like Janansfer. Japanese airport officials were performing routine checks on Janansfer, but something that wasn't routine happened. Janansfer had what looked like a normal passport. The passport even had valid stamps from different countries all over the world, including Japan, which made it even more believable. Janansfer even had several real European currencies and bank checks. The only problem was the name of the country on Janansfer's passport was Taured. The Japanese officials were confused. Taured, they hadn't heard of a country called Taured. So the officials had to take Janansfer aside, and by this time he was visibly frustrated. How couldn't they not have heard of Taured? He claimed it was a country that was 2,000 years old. He said he had a business meeting in Tokyo. He even had the documentation to prove that he does have an office he was visiting in Tokyo. So the officials gave him a map and asked him to point out where this Taured is. The man immediately pointed to a country on the map. The country was between France and Spain, where the real-world microstate of Andorra is. So it made sense that he had a French accent if he was from Andorra, but Andorra isn't Taured. The officials told the man this, and he couldn't believe his ears. He argued that there was a country there. He was sure about what he was saying. The officials were even more confused by this strange man and his strange country, since the man was convinced he was right. They called the office where he was supposed to have his business meeting. It should be an easy one, especially as he had documents to prove that he had business with that workplace. What would they find? Janansfer's case wasn't the first of its kind. In fact, it was now like the unresolved case of Joseph Vorin. Vorin was a strange man who looked Caucasian and was wandering around a small village in the district of Lebas, near Frankfurt on the Oder, Germany, in 1850. When the authorities approached him and asked questions from him, Vorin spoke an odd version of German and wrote in bizarre languages he called Abramian and Laxarian. He claimed he was from Laxaria when and was looking for his brother when. Vorin didn't know what Germany was. He didn't even know there was a continent named Europe. He told authorities that his country Laxaria was in a continent named Sakria, which was separated from. Well, how about that? Voron's mystery wasn't the only one Janansfer's story and situation was similar to. It was also similar to the story of a man who was arrested in Paris for stealing bread in 1905. When he spoke to the police, they couldn't understand what he was saying. His language was strange to them, and the only thing they could pick up from what he was saying was Lisbia. So, the police thought, this gentle thief has to be from Portugal. They mistook his Lisbia for Lisbon, so they sent for a Portuguese interpreter. After talking to the man, the Portuguese interpreter was lost. He didn't know what the man was saying. For those guys, they had no way of proving who they were, but at least technology was on the side of the man from Taured. So before the detour, I mentioned that the man from Taured asked the airport officials to call the hotel. What they found out was shocking. Janansfer was certain that the office would clear him. He was a regular face there after all. Imagine his surprise when the airport officials told him that the office claimed he didn't have business with them. Now Janansfer was worried. What in the world was going on? Fortunately, there was a lifeline for the bespoke man from Taured. He had booked a hotel room ahead of his journey. He provided his details, and the airport authorities called the hotel. The hotel existed, but just like the office they called, they claimed they didn't have a reservation for that man. Now Janansfer felt he was in trouble. What he thought was his life wasn't. He was just a man without bearing and purpose. He didn't know what to do, and the authorities had no idea how to approach this issue. However, they had a lingering suspicion. They thought Janansfer was a spy. Yes, that made sense. He had to be a spy. It was the build-up to the Cold War, and Japan was strongly allied to the United States, so the officials thought that this man was a spy who had come to achieve some nefarious purpose in Japan. They even considered the possibility that Janansfer might not even know he was a spy and had been brainwashed, only to be activated with a special code. This does look like an action film situation, doesn't it? Just like Bucky Barnes in the Captain America comic and films, the Japanese authorities needed to monitor Janansfer, so they got to a solution. They assured Janansfer that they would resolve the situation. They began their own covert investigations, but they couldn't just let a suspected spy go free. So they took his passport for further investigation and locked it up in a box in an investigation room. After 8 hours of staying in the airport in the uncomfortable heat of the Japanese summer, Japanese authorities took him to a hotel and put him on a floor with the window high enough for an escape through it to be impossible, or so they thought. When they arrived at the hotel, the authorities put 2 armed guards in front of Janansfer's room. That ought to hold him, they thought. It did hold him. It held him a little bit too well. So after all the day's stress, Janansfer was tired and had a headache. Then he realized he hadn't eaten since the whole drama happened, so he concluded that food would solve his headache. Janansfer then called in room service. He got food and ate. After receiving the food, the guards saw him. He didn't leave the room and slept off. The next morning, Janansfer didn't come out. He didn't ask for food and even asked for the update for his case. Something was terribly wrong. So the guards went into the room, and what they saw made them lose their minds. Janansfer was gone. The bed he slept in looked neat. The room looked untouched, like no one was ever there. Something spooky was going on. The guards checked the windows. They had locked them before Janansfer slept. They didn't look like they were tampered with. Besides, the room was high up. There was no way Janansfer could have made or survived to jump down. The 2 guards were invited for questioning. They insisted they were at their post and didn't sleep. They were certain Janansfer didn't sneak out when they weren't looking. So, what happened? Magic. Was Janansfer secretly master of the magical arts? Was he an escape artist, a descendant of Harry Houdini? If he had any magic, authorities wouldn't have caught him at all. Besides, magic didn't exist, or did it? Well, not in our universe. There was serious confusion with the hotel, and the guards were in trouble until someone had an idea. What about his passport? So they rushed to check the box they kept Janansfer's passport in. It was gone. Janansfer didn't know the room where they put the passport. He didn't even have the key to the box they put the passport in. So how did he leave with his passport? The theories of what happened. Janansfer had disappeared, and for years people wondered what happened to him and how he was able to leave a room without any traces and take his passport along with him. There have been theories surrounding what happened to Janansfer. Some people poked at the stories. They asked why the airport officials took Janansfer to a random hotel and not a government facility or a holding center even. It's a plausible question, really. It debunked that the event even happened, and it is actually the simplest explanation: deny and forget. But what if it did happen? How could anyone prove that it did? Science to the rescue. Science has pointed out how it happened. There is another theory that this incident generated. Other people have brought about another theory that seemed absurd when Hugh Everett III, a young Princeton University doctoral candidate, proposed it. At the time Everett came up with the idea, he didn't even know what was happening in Japan. Risking his career as a physicist, Everett proposed that there were parallel universes like ours, each different in its own way. In another universe, you could be the President of America, the man who discovered the cure for cancer. You could be anything. The possibilities are infinite. So how does this relate to the disappearance of Janansfer? We'll soon get to that part. The theory holds the secret. Now Everett just didn't bring this claim up and based it on nothing. The claim arose because of the problem of understanding why quantum matter behaves unpredictably. This is one of the many problems quantum physicists have tried to tackle since Max Planck began the study of quantum physics in 1900. Quantum physics is the study of how the universe behaves at a microscopic level. It was during this study that Planck realized some things aren't behaving as they should. As the study evolved, scientists began to build on Planck's discovery. They noted that photons, or tiny packets of light, act like waves and particles. It was strange, and that strange phenomenon, and the physicist Werner Heisenberg proposed that the change that was experienced was because people were observing quantum matter. So our observation affected the perception. That proposition became the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Danish physicist Niels Bohr agreed with this and expanded the idea to say that quantum particles exist not as waves or particles but in all states at once, and the total of these states is what he called wave function. Bohr then stated that it is when these quantum particles are measured that they are forced to take a position. Everett then built on this to say when quantum particles are measured, they don't take a position, but at the point of that. Measuring the particles, the universe splits. His theory would become the many worlds interpretation theory. According to that theory, each universe then has a possible outcome from the measurement of a quantum particle. I know it's trippy, but it's about to get even trippier, but one thing is clear. Science suggests there are different ones. So, let's say there are different worlds, according to science. Does this mean that these worlds interact with each other? Does this mean that Janansfer accidentally left his own world for ours? Everett suggests that these parallel worlds don't interact with each other, so that would mean Janansfer couldn't have crossed over from his dimension to us. Not quite. Another physics theory, string theory, suggests that Janansfer could have. String theory doesn't claim that there are infinite parallel worlds. They are finite and they interact with each other. So Janansfer could have actually accidentally left his dimension for ours, just like Joseph Voron and the bread-stealing man in Paris did. According to the string theory. It isn't only the string theory that suggests this. The many interacting worlds theory suggested by Professor Howard Wiseman and Dr. Michael Hall from Griffith University claims this too. According to that theory, which they published in the prestigious journal Physical Review X, there are infinite parallel universes and they interact with each other by repulsion. So maybe it was during one of these interactions or repulsions that two different worlds briefly combined with each other, depositing Janansfer in our world. There have been criticisms by other scientists that if there are other worlds, why haven't we seen them or experienced them? Maybe we have. Maybe Janansfer is an example. Maybe there are other examples that have just slipped under the radar. Another would have if J.H. Brennan hasn't included it in his book Time Travel: A New Perspective. The book captured the experience of RAF Air Marshal Sir Robert Victor Goddard in 1935. At the time, Goddard was a wing commander and was ordered to examine an abandoned airfield near Edinburgh at a place called Drem. Goddard got to the airfield and it was in a very bad condition. Grass has grown on the tarmac and cattle were even grazing. So he flew back to report to his superiors. Then rain began to fall and Goddard lost his bearings. So he decided to return to the airfield to get his bearings. When Goddard approached the abandoned airfield, something bizarre happened. The rain stopped and the dark clouds erupted into a bright white light. The sun blazed suddenly, and as if that wasn't strange enough, the world around Goddard changed. He was supposed to be seeing an abandoned airfield, but what he saw shocked him. The airfield was teeming with people, and not just people. The mechanics weren't wearing the usual tan of the RAF mechanics, but blue overalls, and the RAF training planes, which were usually painted silver or aluminum color, were suddenly yellow. Goddard even saw models he couldn't even explain. Then just as he saw it, the world shifted again and the field was empty again. Goddard related what he saw, but no one believed him. It was a crazy experience. However, the bizarreness wasn't stopping yet. Just a few months after, the mechanics began to wear blue overalls and training planes were painted yellow. What Goddard saw came to pass. Had Goddard slipped into another world? Was he also like Janansfer or the man from Taured? The difference is no one knows where the man of Taured went. Well, no one knows because the man never existed, at least not as the story portrayed him. As fascinating as the idea of a man from another dimension is, the man from Taured was nothing more than an urban legend. It was a story in passing from the book The Directory of Possibilities by Colin Wilson and John Grants that gained a new life and new details over time since the book was published in 1981. Janansfer wasn't real, but the man behind him was. According to a newspaper article in August 1960 and a radio broadcast, a man named John Allen Kuchar Zegras did enter into Japan with a fabricated passport. So, let's get into his story. We do apologize that it wasn't as scientific as you may have wanted it. While there are conflicting reports on what happened, here is what we have been able to learn from the different news sources of that period. The solution. So, John Allen Kuchar Zegras was a con artist who came up with an idea one day to create a fake passport which was stamped and issued to him at Tamanrasset, the capital of Taured south of the Sahara. We should add that Tamanrasset is a real place in Algeria with tribes called the Tuareg around the place. So, did Zegras get the idea from the word Tuareg? Using that passport, Zegras traveled all over the Middle East claiming he was working for Egypt's Colonel Nasser. He also traveled through Europe and was able to deflect suspicion by claiming that he was traveling under the instructions of the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Central Intelligence Agency. Zegras wasn't also just traveling. He was scamming along the way by cashing out fake checks. He was living the unglamorous life of an outlaw and he was enjoying every bit of it. That was until he got to Japan in 1954. He had been visiting Japan before then and had even gotten entry into the country on October the 24th, 1954, along with his Korean wife. Zegras had reportedly been in Japan using counterfeit checks. By December, he could no longer sustain himself, and his wife and authorities soon picked him up. His wife returned to Korea, but he was charged to court. In court, Zegras claimed that he was working for an Arab-related organization and was working for a U.S. intelligence agency. However, the judge didn't buy any of this, and Zegras was sentenced to a year's imprisonment, but Zegras can be a crazy guy. Immediately, the sentence was handed down to him. He took broken glass he had hid in his mouth and slashed himself, screaming he was going to take his own life. The police disarmed him and off he went to prison. Zegras completed his sentence, and when he got out, he revealed he was going to be a changed man. However, no one heard from him again. Did he manage to turn a new leaf, or did he slip into another universe? No one knows. So, there you have it, folks. We have resolved a mystery that has spanned generations. Which other ones do you think we should cover? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel for more.